Today we're going to be installing these 400 watt rigid solar panels on top of these shipping containers behind me. Now the unique thing about what we're doing is that this is actually not tying into a traditional solar setup. This is going to be feeding into our Anker SOLIX F3800s directly. With a traditional solar array, you're going to probably be wiring some in series and some in parallel. But in this case, everything is going to be in parallel. Now these panels are bifacial, as you may have already noticed. So you can see we've got the face there and on this side. So in order to hopefully maximize output of our system, we're actually going to install our panels between our two shipping containers, giving us hopefully a decent bit of bifacial gain from light that is reflected underneath these. My other reason for wanting these to be in between the two containers is that that's going to allow the snow to slide off and not accumulate. Today they actually happen to be loading up the cows from the pasture. There they go. Those are two calves. There's going to be some livestock action going on in the background. All right, we're just going to get all of our panels up on top of one of the containers here.
I've put links in the description to this exact system that we're working on today, and there are a lot of different combinations and options available, so it might be a good idea to open those up in a new tab or on your phone while we're watching this video. At the time of posting this, there are some pretty great sales going on, but either way, I'll do my best to link to the best possible price in the description.
All right, we got our panels laid out. Now time to start putting in our beams. I'll show you this too. We've got these brackets we're going to be using, and the angle is variable, and you can see right here in the stamping it shows us which angle each one of these marks is. So this is 15, 30, and then 45. You can't quite see it, but we're going to be setting these at 33 degrees because that's optimal for our area of southwest Minnesota. And then we're just going to have a couple bolts protruding out the bottom here, and you could attach this wherever you want to whatever surface you want. But in this case, these beams that we're using actually have a continuous notch. Should work pretty good. We have all of our ends marked off.
Now my dad actually got all these beams off Facebook Marketplace. I think it was like $1 a foot. It was a crazy good deal. I guess they were part of a snow fence previously along one of the Minnesota state highways. So they had a whole pile of these. So they worked pretty fantastic for what I needed. So really appreciate you letting me purchase some from you, Dad. And yeah, we put them to good use here. If you need them, I could always bring them back, I suppose. It would just be a matter of getting them off of the container again. Oli put together all these brackets and got those prepped for us so that we'd be able to more efficiently assemble everything once we get up on top of the container. Also, the telehandler was very nice to use. We could have probably done this all off of ladders, but having this around really made a big difference in improving our workflow. So, thanks again, Dad.
Work smarter, not harder.
Now, just as we were ready to put in our first panel, Naomi actually stopped by, so she was able to help me get this first one slid into position.
You have to count the 7th hole from this end.
Then, of course, Oli took the opportunity to put her to work helping him assemble these brackets.
Outside towards the back. Okay. So I just like sticking these in once you have your 7th hole. Just stick them in so that
it holds
keep track of it. Put on dip.
Moving these panels around by myself was actually fairly doable. Now, it would have been smart to put some more of the panels on the opposite container so I didn't have to carry them across the telehandler platform like this, but it seemed to work out okay. These panels have a conversion rate of 23%, a 10-year warranty, and 25-year linear performance guarantee. Our wattage output is up to 405 watts, and we have a voltage at P max of 31.18. These panels weigh about 50 pounds, so once you add the bracket, it's a few pounds in addition to that, but they're not that bad to handle on your own.
That's gonna be crazy, Dad. We're gonna have these just like sitting with power. goes right there.
The coyotes really got going intermittently as we were working on this project, and we were thankful to be up off of the ground 9 feet instead of working on a direct ground mount array. Let me know what you think about our container mounting strategy. I know that possibly a ground mount would have been a little bit cheaper, but this helped us to get up off the ground and not have to take out quite as many trees.
They're pretty far away still. So here's what the panels are looking like from below. I think it looks pretty awesome.
Dad, since I'm ahead, I'm just going to clean up my area a little bit.
Since you're ahead,
I'm very ahead.
stop rubbing it in, man. This looks really good up here. So we've got 4 more to go.
I guess I should mention that mounting those legs onto the panels is very straightforward. We just used the included hardware and cinched it up with a little Allen key.
Alright, so we need our last 2 solar panels.
One potential downside of putting my solar panels in between the 2 containers like this is that it makes it difficult for me if I were to want to put a roof in between the 2 containers. Sometimes I just tend to overthink things though, and this was just a really obvious solution, and I'm really liking how it turned out. So maybe in the future I'll kick myself and decide I need to move all the panels because I want a roof there.
I mean, this is just temporary, obviously.
But in reality, I think that it's probably going to stay this way for a long time. Except for those clamps, of course. We'll definitely be replacing those with something more permanent. To keep my brackets straight, I just simply measured 3 inches back from the edge of each beam once I had them placed all correctly.
I've been using the M12 Surge Impact. This is actually Oli's, so thanks Oli. And a right angle tool with our 8mm or 6mm hex bit on there to get into these tight spaces. And the impact works really good to kind of cinch up a nut that you can't get a hold of. Oh no.
What? The bolt fell?
Yeah. There we have it.
As you guys may have already noticed, we're using these C-clamps to attach our beams to the top of the containers, at least initially here. I do want to develop a better program for attaching them more permanently, but I also don't want to drill a bunch of holes in the container. Let me know if you have any ideas for what might work well for attaching it.
Alright, well we got them all installed. It is close to midnight. Hey, they're mostly pretty straight except for that one. Look at this.
Oh, whoa, what's up with it? Wait, did I put it on the wrong setting? Yeah, I did. Oh, come on, we were so close.
We could definitely tell it was getting towards the end of the day. I even managed to drop the wing nut here, but thankfully Oli got it.
We're gonna call that a day. Now that it's
I'd say a night.
a night, yeah. Now that it's after midnight.
It's the morning, technically.
Yeah, good morning.
Call it a morning.
But we got all the panels up, so
That's all that matters.
that was the goal.
Every time you get halfway through the pipe, it would...
We're running 2-inch conduit out to our solar panels.
The minimum burial depth, according to the National Electrical Code, is going to be 18 inches to the top of the conduit, or 24 inches if you're going underneath a driveway. So keep that in mind for whatever project you may be working on, and be sure to check with the authority having jurisdiction.
Man, she's very quiet. She's not stepping in our trench.
Oh no, not the M12 radio. Bye, Big Red. Have a good day. enjoy our self-guided tour of the property. Good. So our overall trench length is 196 feet, so we'll call that 200 by the time we get up out of the ground on either end. So we're gonna have a decent bit of voltage drop, especially since we'll have like another, I don't know, 20 feet into where we're hooking up to our F3800s in here. And on that side, depending on which panel it is, probably have a good 30 to 60 feet on that end. So what you got there?
Wire.
Wire? What kind of wire?
PV wire.
What size is it?
8 gauge.
8 gauge. And how many times do you have to do this?
Only like 18.
16.
16?
Only 16 times.
Not quite.
So we're unrolling our PV wire.
Like Oli said, we're going to be running 8 gauge PV wire, and we're actually going to be running a total of 16 strands, or 8 sets, out to our panels.
Okay, so we are now marking our cable sets. For our first 4 sets, we're going to use a single stripe of one of the 4 colors. Oli's going to go mark the other ends, and then once we get to the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th one, we'll just use 2 stripes instead of 1.
Now the reason we're running so much wire is because of the way the F3800 is designed, we can't run anything that is a higher voltage than 60 volts, hence why everything is going to be done in parallel. Each F3800 has 2 XT60 ports, meaning that we could have actually gotten by with just 4 sets of 8 gauge, but we ran 8 for a specific reason which we'll talk about.
Now I'm just using my pocket knife to deburr the inside edge of the conduit.
We're running 2-inch PVC to protect our PV wire. This is technically not required since PV can be directly buried, but we're doing this as an extra precaution.
Oli, are you surprised at how this looks? Like, I thought it was going to look fuller than this, didn't you?
Yeah. Let's get 4 gauge or something.
4 gauge?
Just get like 2 of those.
No, man, no way. Hopefully, this won't snag on anything, and we'll push it through. Now I think that it's going to push fine. Okay, there, I think I felt our first fitting.
Keep coming. Here it comes. Yeah. That's good.
I mean, it's about right. I wouldn't want any less, but do we want a tiny bit more?
No, I don't actually think so.
If we have any more, it's going to just be a mess,
Yeah.
right?
Just think about all your connectors right here. And then you have those little extensions that split off from 2 and make it 1.
Yep.
So you're going to have a lot of those, which are like a foot long.
Yep.
Or a little bit. So
Yeah.
I
So
think altogether it's going to be pretty good.
we're done. We got it in here. I can't believe it. And the other end of this is going to be all the solar panels.
According to the National Electrical Code, you are actually not permitted to put the conduit over the top of the wires like we're doing in this video. You're supposed to assemble the conduit in full first and then pull your conductors through. Now we could have done that had we had the correct equipment, but this many 8 gauge wires, 16 of them, is actually really heavy. In the future, if we need to pull these out, we definitely could, but we just had to do it this way in this case.
At sunset now.
We finally made it over to the container where we brought this up the side and across the top using another LB fitting.
Nice job, man. Oh.
Just snug it up a little more. There we go.
Comes across, and we've got quite a bit of extra cable. But I mean, it's just enough if you think about going down there, going across to that back corner over there. You won't have a ton extra.
Are you guys about coming?
Just about. We just finished the conduit across the roof on the container. We'll be there as soon as we can. We are starting to do some cable management to kind of organize and bring all of our cables back. Now we do have a couple of panels put in use already right here with our Anker C1000. So that thing's charging up. So those are all done in parallel, as you can see. So over here we've got Oli. He's working on cable management.
All right, this is our positive. Gonna clip these little green zip ties that hold our wire. This is our negative.
It took us a little bit of planning to figure out how we were going to lay out our cables. Now, because of how we spaced out our panels so that they would be nice and even across the entire length of the top of the container, it made it so that our cables had to go pretty directly together in between them. We had just enough length so that we didn't have to add any extra cables other than for the third panel, but in hindsight, maybe putting them tighter together would have been a good plan. What do you guys think?
We have made it to the last group of 3. I'll give you guys some close-ups of how we're hooking this up as we go through it. So these first 2 right here, the wires are long enough to just reach to the center from either side. That one down there is not quite long enough, obviously, so we have to use 1 extension cable. That's going to be running through this piece of unistrut, which we have attached to our brackets underneath. So it's just kind of acting as our cable tray for them to all run over and ultimately get connected. Now, we did have these extension cables on here because we were temporarily using the solar down below. So we actually have to take these apart. Now, one of these has a really simple connector. This kind of gives me a good opportunity to show you guys this, where you just squeeze it and it disconnects it just like that. So super easy on that one. This one, however, doesn't have that same quick connect. So you're going to be best off using a tool, something like this, which allows you to kind of depress those latches in here. You get it lined up, stick it in there, and now we should be able to detach. Now we're going to take our cables from each side, and I'm just kind of putting them through our brackets here. We need to connect those together. We're going to use these connectors right here. Now there's lots of variations on these that you can get, and you might want to consider the ones that keep it straight. But in this case, I actually benefit from the shape of these. So we're going to take our negative connectors first here. Our first panel is going to go right here. Second one goes right here. And our third one is going to be coming from an extension cable. So we're going to lay our extension cables here in our unistrut tray. It actually works really, really nicely. So down there it's pretty simple. You can just snap those together. And back over here, we can connect our negative coming from Oli's panel down there. And this is going to go back to our F3800s. So now we can go ahead and connect our positives. And we could just connect them directly here, but what we're creating is a set of panels that are wired in parallel. And when they're in parallel, it is important to add fuses. So these are 20 amp fuses, and these are going to go on the positive side, so the positive side coming from your panel, and they're inline fuses that just connect up really nicely with your MC4 connectors, and we'll snap those all inline. So what these fuses do is it protects each one of the panels. Were there to be a short circuit, the excessive amperage won't be able to damage the panel. Instead, it will just take out this fuse right in here, which I guess I should show you guys. In order to access that fuse, all you have to do is thread this apart. Right on the side it says 20 amps. Obviously, it'd be very simple to replace one of these if you did have one that went bad. Alright. Now, since each set of 3 panels is going to have 2 sets of conductors going back, we need to use these 1 to 2 adapters, like that. And there we have it. We're ready for our second set of conductors to attach right here. So I think this actually looks decently tidy. You can see further away over there how that one looks. We're ready to crimp the ends on our 8-gauge conductors coming out to the containers. And right over here I've got the stuff prepared to do that. You can see right here we've got our PV connectors. We had to order some that were compatible with the 8-gauge wire that we ran. And they're significantly heavier than your standard ones. So because of that, we can't use a standard PV crimper. We're going to have to use a more heavy-duty crimper like this one right here. So Naomi was just saying that she wants to tell us what she thinks about the solar panels so far. I'm just kidding. She didn't say that. But what do you think about it?
Yeah, they're great. It's good how the snow slides off of them.
Yeah.
It's cool. Yeah, I'm learning a lot about it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also the trench, I'm slightly concerned I will forever have a trench all across the yard and the driveway.
Why? Because I need to put one more thing in it?
Because he needs to put one more thing in it, yep.
Well-
Oh, you can't close that up, gotta put one more thing in it.
Now, if we look here, these are our positives coming from the panels, right? And these are the negatives going back to the panel. So we base the connector on our red to receive this positive terminal. So we're going to be putting this connector on the positive side, on our reds, and this one's going to go on our blacks. This larger connector actually uses the solid pin. So we're going to be crimping the pin style pieces onto our reds. So we'll put that on there like that. Open up our crimper. Get it aligned. There we go. And now that we got that crimped, we'll just yank on it real good, make sure that it's actually connected. And it looks great. That is definitely not coming off there. So now we can take the rest of our PV connector, thread it apart. This side right here has the gasket in it. That goes down like that. And then this just pushes on until it snaps in position. Just like that. And now we tighten this down. And we have to use some wrenches to tighten all these. So with this, it kind of acts as a torque wrench, which is cool. So you stick that one on there. The other side slides over the cable and goes on here. And this will allow us to tighten up that gasket. And once it clicks, then you want to go a little bit more until it clicks one more time. And that's it. Now it's tightened down. And we have a good solid connection here. Hey! Yeah. And we're ready to connect it. Just like that, our first connection's been made.
I do want to mention that we could have gotten by with a single set of conductors for each set of 3 panels right away here. And I'm going to show you exactly how much wattage we gained by having the second parallel set a little bit later in the video. But just know that in most cases, you'll only need one set.
Everything is marked so that we can keep track of which ones to plug in down in the basement. Now I'm using this Knipex cable cutter to strip back the insulation. It actually works pretty good, but you have to be careful not to cut too deep and to damage the stranded conductors underneath. I'm going to show you a few different types of crimpers once we are crimping in the basement. All right, that one's done. Now you don't actually have to fully take apart this fitting. If it's loose enough, it should be able to slide right over and snap on. So I've left enough cable, like we're looping this over this way a little bit, so that we have a little bit extra. I told Oli earlier, if you can pull this thing off, I'll give you $5, and he tried pretty hard. I'm glad I'm on top of a ladder right now. So we just push this on here. It's like 11 at night. This will make 16 connections that I've made out here. That's really scary sounding.
It's pretty cool how you can run PV wire without any other protection. It's rated to be installed behind solar arrays and even to direct sunlight, although it's good to avoid that if possible. I used quite a few zip ties. I believe you're supposed to secure it every 24 inches as a minimum.
Now, most of the time, you're probably going to be working with up to 10 gauge PV wire. 8 gauge is relatively uncommon unless you have a need for it like we did.
But if you are using those smaller gauges, most of the time you're going to be using this style of solar PV crimper that works with these pins. Comment down below and let me know what tool is your favorite for stripping the outer jacket off of this. To strip it, I've just been going like this, and I think what makes this cutter so nice is that the angle of these blades is pretty straight down here. It's not really blunt like some wire cutters are. So it's really easy to cut through just the insulation. You kind of just squeeze it down a little bit and then rotate it. And it just does a really nice job. So I'll link to this Knipex in the description. But they do make dedicated options as well. Now after you strip it back, you want to kind of examine it and see how good you did. If you nicked a lot of the conductors in here or cut them off, you should probably attempt to re-strip it, because you don't want to be reducing the size of your connection by cutting off some of the wires. Now this is our positive coming from our panel outside, and you always kind of want to think in the flow of electricity and how it's going to be headed towards your unit, because it's not like for your positive cable coming from your panels, you're still going to use both styles of ends. It's just about the direction of flow more so than about like, oh, this connector is always for positive. Well, it is positive in the sense that the current is flowing this direction, but on the opposite end of this cable, we obviously have the opposite style. So on the other end of this cable, it looks like this. So this is receiving the positive from our panels and flowing towards wherever we're going to be using the electricity. Now you have to remember that on your positive MC4 connector, the female style pin goes in the male style MC4 connector. Now sometimes it's easiest to just take your pin and set it into the crimper, and you can see that we're about halfway between each side of the area that needs to be crimped. So that should be a good spot to go for it. And now we'll take our wire and put that in and hold it nice and tight. It should pretty much crush until the dies almost touch. There it is. Now release. With this style crimp, man, it is very solidly connected. I do not think we will ever have any issues whatsoever with conductivity. So for this one, we're going to use our hydraulic crimper. The hydraulic crimper is pretty easy to use. All we do is tighten this. Now when we squeeze the handle, it'll start to go down. So we'll just kind of get it kind of close here. Now we'll go ahead and insert our pin and tighten that down. And I know that it does say 10 gauge right there on the die, but that was the size that was needed in order to make this actually crimp down properly. For whatever reason, the one that actually said 8 gauge was not matching up with the size at all. And just like that, our wire has been crimped. Give it a good tug to make sure that it is firmly attached. Clicks, and then one more time and we're good. Alright, moment of truth. Hey, there we are. 37 volts open circuit. If we flip this around, on the display of your tester, it'll actually tell you the volts are negative. Okay, plug it in there, man.
Quick.
Dude.
0 watts.
We're officially charging.
Oh my. That's a lot.
137 watts already?
Whoa, 176. 216? Actually, it might get like 3. Did the sun just come out?
So yeah, on a cloudy day, we're getting 236 watts.
Alright guys, today is the day that we should be able to hit our peak output that we will ever get from our system that we just finished setting up. So, sun is up. It hasn't quite gotten to where all the shadows are past, but we are starting to produce solar energy right now, so we'll see how it ends up.
So we've got one set for each set of 3 panels outside that's connected to the F3800 right now. So we have not used our second set for each one. So we're going to get the ends crimped on the rest of these so that we are ready to connect it and see how much of a difference it's going to make. And just like that, all of our MC4 ends have been installed here in the house side. So it's going to be interesting to see how many watts we gain by adding our second set of conductors to each one of these. Now I thought that these splitters that I got were 10 gauge, but they are actually only 12 gauge. So comment down below, do you think I should upgrade these to 10 gauge? And just like that, we're ready to connect our XT60 to our F3800. So we'll get that one in here. The sun is getting higher in the sky. We're getting up to close to 1300 watts here now. And I'm just kind of arranging our batteries. So I've got all the batteries moved over with that unit over there. And you can kind of see that with these cables, you have to be pretty strategic in how you stack them. And I know a lot of people complain about the way these cables are designed, but really what it comes down to is they don't want you to end up in a situation where you're putting vent to vent. You've got all these batteries that need to cool when they are being used. We're going to get our second unit set in place here, and we're getting close to being able to do our solar test to see about how much difference it made running 2 sets of 8 gauge conductors per XT60 instead of just one. Alright, we're humming right along at about 1350 watts over here. This has been consistently a couple hundred watts higher at 1500. Let's go look outside and just see if we have any shading. Sure enough. Wow, it's amazing how we could tell that that was there. Only a couple more minutes though, and it's not gonna be shaded anymore. Except for the handles of my C-clamps, which those are temporary. Those are temporary. Since our shading is gone now, you can see we've got much closer to 1500 watts there, 1492. And over here we're within 50 watts. So very similar output from each set of panels. Update. Since these are lithium iron phosphate batteries, they are very durable and they work really well. As long as you keep them in a good temperature environment, it's fine if you discharge them down to 0, back up to 100. Just make sure you don't leave them discharged all the way down at 0% because they will continue to self-discharge. So you should always recharge these once every 3 months. Here you can see which batteries are updating because they have the illuminated buttons. So we've got 2 right there that are updating. 3 on this stack. Well, they might have just finished. Those top 3 there. Whoop. Okay, it must be updated. Right now you can see we're pulling in 1550 watts, and what I'm going to do now is disconnect so that we only have 1 set of 8 gauge conductors per XT60. So give me a second here, you should see that wattage start to drop. So there we've taken off 1 set, 1450, so we lost about 100 watts there. Alright, the second set has been disconnected. And now you can see about 1330. And our other unit is producing still around 1500 watts. So it's not just the sunlight. So we're gaining a little over 200 watts by having those extra set of cables. Now there's a reason why we did this, more so than just to gain 200 watts of energy. Now it actually has to do with the input ranges on the side of the F3800. And when we originally were planning our system here, we thought we were going to fall outside of the voltage range. So if it's 32 to 60 volts, it says 25 amps, and 11 to 32 volts is only 10 amps. And that's actually a huge problem because if you have enough voltage drop because you're further away from your panels, you're not going to be able to get your 25 amps. You're only going to get 10, in which case we would be limited to much, much lower current if we fell below those ranges. Now, thankfully, they actually updated the F3800 so that it no longer abides by those numbers. But suffice it to say that we really didn't need all that extra cable in order to accomplish most of our solar production. Although it is nice that we're able to gain
a little bit of extra input this way. Now 200 watts of extra input over time will add up, but I highly doubt it'll come very close to paying for the extra cable that we put in. Which I guess I could do the math on that and see. But at 200 watts, how long would it take to pay for $600 worth of cable? And just like that, we're back up to 1550 watts. This is pretty amazing that you can build a system out like this and connect your own panels through the local feed-in feature. We call this the local feed-in because you can also have solar panels that are connected to your house that are grid-tied solar panels. And then you can use this CT monitor to see basically how much energy your grid-tied solar is producing. And once you know that, then the F3800s can decide how to use that energy. So if you're producing excess solar, more than your house is using, you can actually charge your F3800s from your grid-tied solar, which is a really, really amazing feature to have because a lot of places you don't really have great net metering agreements anymore, and that's basically where if you put 1 kilowatt hour back to the grid, then they'll give you 1 kilowatt hour back at a different time. But a lot of areas have gone away from that to now where if you give them a kilowatt hour, you're probably only getting a quarter of what a kilowatt hour is going to cost you. So by having this, you can actually use your own solar power, charge up your batteries when there's excess because it can monitor it using this CT clamp here, and then you can discharge your batteries in order to basically use your own solar instead of sending it back to the grid. So real quick, I wanted to use a thermal camera just to kind of see how everything is holding up. It's kind of interesting how much more heat there is on the main body of the F3800 as compared to the batteries. They seem to just be staying much cooler overall, but obviously that's because of the inverter that's in there. And then we can also take a look at our cables just to see if there's any abnormal hot spots, and it actually looks pretty good. The warmest section does appear to be this little stretch of 12 gauge right there before it goes back up to the 10 gauge. We're running at about 88 degrees, 90 degrees, but it's always really useful to take a look because this will very quickly tell you where your hot spots are. Now interestingly down here, it does appear that there's a couple that are warmer than the others, and so I definitely want to be looking into that a little bit more just to make sure everything is good on that. That one is the panel that's furthest away, so I don't know if that matters or not. But yeah, it's pretty nice to have a thermal camera just for the sake of being able to see heat. Taking a look in the app, you can see we hit a peak output of 3.1 kilowatts and produced 18.7 kilowatt hours. We are running in the self-consumption mode. That's going to definitely be the best option in most cases for using as much of your own solar power as possible. But you can also change it to time of use if you have different electrical rates and you want to avoid using the peak rates. That's going to be the mode that you want to use. You can turn on manual backup power, which will pull from the grid and recharge your batteries as fast as possible. If you do anticipate some kind of a storm, you can use that. And then this is for our reserve capacity. I've got that set to 20% is suggested. So during the day, it could, or during the night rather, when we're not producing solar, it will drain the batteries all the way down to 20% if that much energy is needed. Now you can see that I've already saved $401 on my energy, but that's actually not true. I accidentally set my electrical rate to $13 per kilowatt hour instead of 13 cents. So I got to figure out if I can reset that so I can get an accurate reading on that. So 18.7 kilowatt hours is how much we've been able to get the most in a single day so far this November. We had a couple cloudy days. After that, 2 kilowatt hours, 3.4, and then today we were at 17 with intermittent clouds. So pretty awesome. I'm really excited about it. And there's just lots of different details that you can look at in the app. One useful one is to look at our discharge amount, and it'll give us a chart for our state of charge for our batteries.
So if we go back a couple days, you can see how this was our day that we produced 18 kilowatt hours. Our battery levels went up, and then the next couple days they actually just went down because we weren't producing enough. And then today we went back up again because we did produce a good chunk of electricity once more.
I want to go over a few of the things I really like about the Anker SOLIX F3800 system, as well as a few things that I think need improvement. Now, the things that I like to start off with is that this system is portable. If I want to, I could go put another home power panel in at another house and move these batteries over there, and it would only take me like an hour to do that. If you have permanently attached batteries, you're just a lot less flexible. Another nice thing about moving them around is that we actually took these in our fifth wheel and we're able to run the air conditioning during a 6-hour drive, which the output, obviously it's no problem since we can output 6,000 watts with just one of these things, 12,000 watts if we have two. And I guess that's another major benefit is the 120, 240 volts that these are able to output. I think that that's absolutely essential. If you want to buy a large power station, make sure that it can have 240 volts, because there are a lot of things, especially if you live in a rural area, you want to have 240 volts to be able to supply energy to a well pump, because almost all of them are going to be 240 volts. There are a few sometimes you'll run into that are 120, but it's almost always 240. So being able to run 240 volt loads is absolutely awesome, and it took a long time to finally get a company that listened to that request to allow us to have both 120 and 240 from a single unit. So that is really cool. Another thing that I love is the fact that we've got solar panels connected with these batteries that allows us to keep our refrigerators and freezers going even if we had an extended outage and without access to fuel or gas generator, and if the grid were continuously down, we'd have enough energy to run probably our gas furnace, our refrigerators, most of the things here we could probably do. We are in the beginning of November 2024, and up here in Minnesota with the amount of daylight that we have, I'm pretty impressed that we were able to produce that 3 kilowatts and 18 kilowatt hours or so of output throughout the day, especially since we are about 250 feet worth of cable between here and where the F3800s are actually located. We're going to be producing probably $2 to $3 worth of electricity a day, probably closer to $2 a day, especially on these shorter days. But over time, that will make a difference in reducing our investment. Now, a couple things that I would love to see improved on the system. The first of which is going to be the app. The app definitely works well enough to serve most of the functions that most people are going to need, but there's not really a lot of detail if we want to click and hit more info, so we could see some of the more granular data for what are our voltages coming into our XT60 ports, how many amps are we pulling from those, and being able to see just more information would be really great. A problem that we have encountered with the home power panel is related to its AC coupling feature, and I think that this is a really amazing feature because basically this can offset the loads in your main panel. Wherever your CT monitors are located, that is going to be energy that it measures and says, hey, you're pulling 500 watts from the grid. Let's bump our voltage up just enough so that that 500 watts is no longer being pulled from the grid and it is now coming from your home battery system and your solar. And the thing that we've ran into is that it tries to offset that down to 0 watts, so no usage at all from your utility. And that's assuming your CT monitors are in your first disconnecting means, therefore it's offsetting 100% of your property's energy usage. And what can happen is that for a fraction of a second, if a major load, like if your air conditioner shuts off, or even if the grid voltage just drops a little bit because the grid is under a heavy load, there is a possibility that for a microsecond you can be feeding energy back to the grid. And the specific instance that I know of, a friend of mine actually had the utility company call him and say, hey, you have an unapproved solar installation because we saw that you were backfeeding the grid. Now the amount of electricity was almost nothing, but it was still enough to spin that digital meter backwards and throw a red flag in the utility system saying, hey, these people are backfeeding. Now, it would be super easy to fix this. All they have to do is give us a way to change the amount of wattage that is offset by the home power panel, and it would just be a slider. It would say, hey, I want to continuously draw 50 watts from the grid, or 100 or 200, and that by itself would solve it. Another way that you can solve it more actively is to move where your CT monitors are located so that it only offsets the amount of electricity that you want. So if you moved it into a sub panel instead of in your main panel, then anything that is upstream essentially of where you put your CT monitors will not be offset. So that's kind of a workaround, but it's definitely something that should be in the app. Now, when it comes to balancing the load on your batteries, it actually does a pretty good job when the batteries are draining. In fact, right now, this unit over here is supplying all of the electricity for the house, and this one is not doing anything. And the reason for that is that this one has a slightly higher state of charge. However, during the day when we have solar being produced, if we have an uneven amount of solar, let's say that we had 500 watts coming in here and 2,000 watts coming in over here, and a 2,000 watt load in our house, it's going to split that load 50-50, and it's going to put 1,000 watts here and 1,000 watts here. And what can happen is that this one can charge up to 100% and start wasting energy because it can't take anymore, and it'll still continue to split that load 50-50 between the two units. So it would be really nice if it was able to shift the load in proportion to how much solar was coming in to the unit that has the higher amount of wattage coming in from solar. Another thing that I'd love to see is a little bit of automation options configured. So what I'm kind of anticipating is if we have days where we have excess amounts of solar, and these are both topped up to 100%, I could obviously go turn on some loads, turn on a mini split, just some way to utilize that energy, because otherwise it's not going to be used if you have excess solar. But if there was a way that when it hits 90% or 95% or even 100, that we could configure through like if this then that or other similar automation program to where I can turn on a relay to turn on a water heater to use that excess solar, that would be really cool. So some more integrations, a little bit more optionality for connecting with other smart devices would be kind of cool. Ollie's going to run outside and kill the power, and we're going to test the UPS function. Right now we are running off of the batteries because we are in time of use mode, and that's one of the things that the marketing seems to be pretty strong in saying that we have really good UPS capability. However, we have ran into an issue where it sometimes takes, I don't know, between 2 to 3 seconds to switch. Oh, that time it was really fast. To switch between grid power and being off grid. So that's something that could be clarified a little bit in like how long is it actually supposed to take, because sometimes it's a couple seconds and sometimes it's really fast, like what you just saw. That was really fast. All in all, I think the F3800 system is a really good option if you want something that is portable, easy to configure and set up, and doesn't require that you learn everything about setting up a more like permanent off-grid setup. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more expensive than doing, building everything with individual components. And that's why you're going to pay a little bit of a premium for something like this versus something that you have to put together. Thanks so much for watching. Check the links in the description if you want to check out what's available from the Anker SOLIX team. And we'll talk to you guys in the next one. See ya.